Good evening and welcome to Altos, a weekly news and current affairs program produced by the Catholic News and broadcast on Trinity TV and Stay Tuned TTT. I'm Neil Parsonlal. Here's a look at this week's top stories. The Archbishop speaks out on the sacred and the profane at the Olympics opening ceremony. Archbishop Emeritus Robert Rivas leads a walk to raise funds to rebuild the Roman Catholic Church in Meru that was destroyed by Hurricane Beryl. The oldest nun in the Archdiocese celebrates her 75th anniversary. Venezuelan bishops add their voices to calls for verification of recent election results. And later, we speak Emancipation and the Church with Father Stephen Alexander. And now for our top story. Archbishop Charles Jason Gordon has added his voice of condemnation to the opening ceremony of the Paris Olympics on July 26th, saying the presentation featuring drag queens made fun of over 1 billion Roman Catholics. His Grace said the portrayal was a parody of Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper and ridiculed something sacred for Roman Catholics.
But our world and our Western value system has come to this point where we will include everybody on the fringe, but the Catholic will not be included. The Catholic will be ridiculed. Look and see, over and over again. Look and see. The value that we hold as Catholics most dearly is what the world is most angry, upset, and vicious against. And at the heart of our value system is Eucharist. And this is what the world is most angry and vicious against.
In his homily at the Living Water Community Chapel last Sunday, Archbishop Gordon also highlighted the growing influence of a Western value system and repeated attacks on Catholic values.
And it can't be by accident that the tableau with drag queens and people who are in that way of living in life. And look at the real parody here. Male and female, he created them. In his image and likeness, he made them, on the one hand. And then on the other hand, this new theory where I am whatever I desire to be.
4 churches in the Northern Vicariate are collaborating for a walk to aid the reconstruction of the Church of the Immaculate Conception in Meru, one of the Grenadine Islands ravaged by Hurricane Beryl. The walk begins at 7 a.m. this Saturday from St. John the Evangelist in St. Anthony's and St. Fimba's, all heading to the Church of the Nativity, where there will be benediction. Lara Pickford Gordon and Andre Burton have been following the story and tell us more about the event.
Bishop Gerard County of Kingstown, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, is in Trinidad and supporting the Walk for Meru, which was prompted by Archbishop Emeritus Robert Rivas, a former bishop of the diocese.
We are hoping our target is $50,000 for the walk. I'm hoping to make much more, raise much more than that, in other efforts for rebuilding the Church of the Immaculate Conception on Meru, which was a beautiful little cut stone church.
Hurricane Beryl caused 6 deaths in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and more than 90% of the buildings were destroyed in Meru, Canoan, and Union Island. Bishop County said rebuilding Meru will take time.
The hurricane took place on a Monday. By the Friday I was down there and I was just devastated. I never, first time I'm experienced a hurricane in my life in the first place. And so it was really, but I was just there with the people. But the devastation is total.
Tickets for the walk are priced at $300, $200, and $100. This includes a jersey with the logo Walk for Meru. And while all are welcome to take part in the walk, Archbishop Rivas invited people to use their creativity to help.
It's the spirit behind it, and what we can do. Sometimes people say, I can't walk, I would love to, but you can contribute. Then contribute. Find creative ways to do it.
I am Lara Pickford-Gordon for Catholic News, Altos.
Vicar General Father Martin Sergiu is appealing to the population to treat the elderly with respect and to stop treating them as though they have lost all value because of age, infirmity, or disability. Delivering the homily on World Day of Grandparents celebrated on Sunday, July 28th, Father Sergiu offered some suggestions for treating those who are now in the twilight of their years with compassion. Roger Sant has more in this report.
Addressing the congregation at the Minor Basilica of the Immaculate Conception in Port of Spain, Father Sergiu spoke to the attributes of grandparents, declaring they are most times faith builders in the homes. Many times, he said, that were it not for the push of grandparents, there would be no baptisms in the church. But he said they are also repositories of history.
Stories about struggling and what it means to face hard times and still educate children and to provide housing and food.
In the book of Ecclesiasticus, he said elders are identified as figures of wisdom, people who have the experience, who know life from the inside out and can provide the much-needed guidance and mentoring that young people need. Unfortunately, he said, there is now a trend to a mentality of ageism where the elderly are treated as less important.
Ageism looks upon you as having less value, less wisdom, as someone your life is almost over, so go and sit somewhere in the corner.
Father Sergiu said Pope Francis has deemed this treatment of the elderly as a throwaway culture.
And so we sort of throw away our elderly and our seniors because of their senior age and their disabilities of one kind or another. We treat them as if they have less human dignity. We treat them with less value. And that's a mentality of ageism.
But he said that the elderly needs care and attention and most of all, love.
So we must remember to combat ageism, to show our grandparents that love and tender care.
Father Sergiu is also advocating that ongoing education also be used as a tool to help the elderly.
And this might strike you as odd. Why education? Because the doctors tell us that to prevent Alzheimer's and so on, it is good to keep the mind active. We have to care for them also in the mind and keep that mind active and truly celebrate their contribution to family life, to community life, and to national life.
Roger Sant reporting for Catholic News, Altos.
And speaking of respect for the elderly, Catholic News Altos congratulates Sister Marie-Thérèse Retou. She's 102 years old, and on Emancipation Day, she celebrated her 75th anniversary of religious profession. Chief Celebrant Archbishop Emeritus Robert Rivas had this to say about Sister Marie-Thérèse.
It only takes a spark to get a fire going. Sister Marie-Thérèse was a spark in the church in Trinidad and Tobago. As a Dominican sister, she answered the call to serve and touch the lives of many.
And you can read more about that celebration in next Sunday's issue of the Catholic News. Roman Catholic priest Father Steve Ransom says in his opinion, marriage is the most important institution in the Church. And while he admits marriage is not easy, he believes there are tried and true formulas that can help marriage and family life. Delivering the homily at a special Mass on the feasts of Saints Joachim and Anne last Friday, Father Ransom identified fidelity, love, respect, and appreciation as some key pointers for happy marriages. Roger Sant has more in this report.
Saints Joachim and Anne are the parents of the Virgin Mary and the grandparents of our Lord Jesus Christ. Their feast day is celebrated on July 26th. Several churches throughout the country used the opportunity last Friday to hold special services to renew the marriage vows of couples. One such mass was held at St. Philip and St. James in Chaguanas, where parish priest Father Steve Ransom spoke of the importance of the state of matrimony.
The most important institution in the world is actually not church. It's not good to compare two good things, I suppose, counterproductive. But the most important institution is actually marriage and, by extension, family.
Father Ransom said married couples must always have a united front showing love and respect to each other in public so that no one would be able to laugh at either partner. He identified respect in the household as another key element.
Mutual respect. Even with children, that is your mother, have respect. That is your father, have respect. As long as you're in this household, you respect your mother, respect your father.
Father Ransom lamented that in many instances, couples part ways because of a lack of appreciation in the marriage.
I give so much to this relationship. I pour out my whole being, and I don't get it back in return. I don't even hear thank you.
And his final piece of advice was for couples to live in harmony with each other in spite of outside influences. Following the homily, 12 couples were invited to wash each other's feet, symbolic of Jesus washing the feet of his disciples. The washing of the feet was followed by the renewal of marriage vows.
I promise to be true to you in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health.
Roger Sant reporting for Catholic News, Altos.
The Our Lady of Fairhaven Cathedral in Roseau, Dominica, became the center of regional reverence on July 25th, as dignitaries, clergy, and the faithful gathered to witness the Episcopal ordination of Bahamian priest, Bishop-elect Kendrick Forbes, as the 10th Bishop of Roseau. Catholic News editor Raymond Sims has more.
In a significant handover, Archbishop Gabriel Malze of Castries, who has served as Apostolic Administrator of Roseau since 2022, addressed the new Bishop of Roseau, highlighting the rich heritage and responsibilities that come with leading one of the oldest dioceses in the Antilles.
You will be expected to run or hit the ground running. However, do not fail to take some time to study the people and the situation which you are about to embrace and to serve.
Earlier in the homily, Archbishop Patrick Pinder of Nassau commended Bishop-elect Forbes, describing him as a gift to the Diocese of Roseau, citing his 22 years of service.
President Burton, Prime Minister Skerritt, many of us have traveled a great distance to be with you on this occasion today. We wish to assure you and all the people of Dominica that in your new bishop, you are receiving not our second best, but our very best.
As Bishop Kendrick Forbes addressed the congregation, he underscored the collaborative spirit essential for the journey ahead.
In the short time that I have been here, many have said to me, Bishop, you have plenty of work to do. And while I embrace that work, know that I will seek to enlist the participation, the involvement of all of the faithful. Because we, emphasis on we have plenty of work to do.
I am Raymond Sims for Catholic News Altos.
The controversial results of Venezuela's elections, which declared Nicolas Maduro the victor, has caused mass protests in the country. Independent pollsters have called the result implausible, and opposition leaders and foreign observers alike have urged transparency over vote tallies. The Venezuelan bishops have added their voices to the call. Rome Reports has more on this.
The results reported on the street are different from those officially issued by the National Electoral Council.
Nicolas Maduro Moro.
Nicolas Maduro Moro from the Gran Polo Patriotico Party won just over 5 million votes with 51.2%. And Edmundo Gonzalez of the Mesa de la Unidad Party won 4.4 million votes. The Mesa de la Unidad Party requested all the results be collected to prove that fraud had taken place. These results have been digitalized on this website. The party is even appealing to the international community to help acknowledge the fraud. World leaders are already visiting that website. While we are talking the proof of Venezuela's victory, the truth that we said we were going to prove is already being verified by the world. The Venezuelan bishops also made a statement, asking people to remain hopeful and requesting that results be verified. We unite our voices with others, both in and out of Venezuela, who demand a process of verification of the ballot results with the active and full participation of all political actors.
It's time now for us to take a short break, and when we return, we speak with Father Stephen Alexander on emancipation and our Africanness.
Altos is brought to you with the kind compliments of Rituals Coffee House.
Thanks very much for staying with us. Our guest today is Father Stephen Alexander, priest in the cluster of La Joqueta and San Rafael. Father Stephen was an attorney at law and in a well-respected firm of attorneys in Port of Spain before he surrendered his calling to the priesthood. Father, welcome to the set of Altos, and we see you clad in what is very comfortable for you this morning.
Thanks, Neil. Wonderful to be here with you.
It's good to have you. Father, in 2020, you wrote that 50 years after the Black Power Revolution, contemporary Trinbago is forced to consider the continued existence of racism and other forms of discrimination towards persons of African heritage. Do you still hold that view today?
Unfortunately, yes, I do. Not only for Trinidad and Tobago, but for the world at large. I have had the opportunity to do some travel for study and otherwise. And even this week, to be profiled in a supermarket. So it does exist. Persons who look a particular way tend to be seen in a particular way. And I think it's something that we in Trinidad and Tobago need to become very more open to the existence of it, and to start putting things in place to deal with the reality of how people are seen and how we respond to them.
But is that something, Father, that is more directed to those who are not African or to the African community, or both?
A bit of both. From the perspective of, just responding to the question, from the perspective of it, there is how those who are other than would see someone, but there is the self-possession of oneself as well. How do I see the value within myself? How do I see and understand the richness of my heritage, my ancestors, the traditions that have borne me? And how do I use the gifts and the graces that I have so that persons who see me would embrace those gifts and respond to me not out of fear, not with trepidation, but with welcome and love. And I think that is what we're looking at in terms of synodality and church, so it plays well into that reality.
In the Emancipation celebrations just yesterday, the Prime Minister is quoted as saying that that persons should not be afraid of claiming their African heritage. Do you think that is still a problem, that we still are afraid to accept or claim our African heritage?
I am cautious in using the word afraid, but I understand exactly what was said. Myself, only just a few years, would be able to acknowledge the reality of what takes place within me when drums are played or when a certain type of music is used. There is a reality of fear in being fully seen and embraced because what that might mean. But I think there is a richness in it. And so whilst I would myself be cautious with fear, there is a reality that we have become much more comfortable with adopting a Western understanding of ourselves and who we are meant to be, that in some way limits, lessens, or devalues the heritage that we have. It's easier to be seen as aligned with African Americanism than it is to be aligned with Pan-Africanism or African culture in the continent. So just something that exists, and I think we need to look at it, and perhaps the Prime Minister is the perfect person to start to put things in place to deal with that reality that exists.
In one of our earlier stories, the Archbishop spoke about this acceptance of the Western values and that kind of culturalization that seems to be taking over. How do you feel about that? Especially given the fact that some people argue that even the church has perpetrated this phenomena, and the church is in fact guilty of racism on her own.
That's a lot, more than one question there, Neil. To try to deal with it from the perspective of what I heard first coming down to the end, I think we can simply listen to our children speak. They are educated via tablet and internet and this and that. And we have a lot of children who sing as if they were brought up in the UK or in the US. Mm-hmm. A popular comic who is very Catholic, I should say, Kivo, he goes by. And Kivo put out something on Instagram this week about why not have, what did he call it? Shadow Benny Street. Why not empower people to be Trinbagonian and to use a Trinbagonian accent? Why not value who we are? Because I think that's at the heart of the issue. The fact that we value other things, and this is not to say that those other things are bad enough in and of themselves, it's just to say that we, in using those realities for the benefit of what they are, also need to give evidence to the worth of who we intrinsically are. And so Shadow Benny Street is something that I would be in support of. I remember No Boundaries and this, I mean.
Certainly. So if I'm hearing correctly then, are you then saying like that we have not yet fully emancipated ourselves from mental slavery?
I think that's a statement that Bob Marley made, that mental slavery, that perhaps even the great Nestor Marley didn't have an understanding of the scope or the range of how packed that as a phrase would be. One of the realities of it is it suggests that we can do it on our own. And one of the realities of our world around us is that that's virtually impossible. Catholicism itself helps us to understand that apart from grace, apart from God, apart from our co-responsibility or collaboration or community or inclusivity, nothing much happens. And so to understand that I could emancipate myself solely based on who I am and what I do is to have a limited appreciation for the different parts around that lead to this. So whilst I do think much has been done in history for us to be where we are, for persons like myself to have the privilege that I've had, because Western society has benefited me. I've studied in various countries over the world. I've had an education and a story that is just brilliant because of the abilities that I have had and benefited from. At the same time, I also learned to appreciate me, to appreciate my ancestors, to appreciate those who paved the way for me.
Would then the issue of reparation, that's huge with Sir Hilary Beckles, and now you're hearing that talk around, would reparations then assist in that emancipation?
My off-the-cuff answer would be yes. I think to see reparations as a handout is incorrect. I think anyone who understands history, anyone who understands geopolitics, economics, etc., and I can take you through a range of topics, would understand the impact of chattel slavery on the world and the benefit that the UK and other areas in the world would have reaped from that. Now we have a situation where there are persons who are the progeny of that reality being disadvantaged. And how about those persons benefiting from the sweat, and I don't say sacrifice, of their ancestors, because a sacrifice is something that I make myself. These ancestors were robbed. They were taken away. We live in a forced, you and I, we live in a forced cultural context because we didn't choose to come here. And so I think we need to benefit from that. And so we've had GATE and we've had different realities in Trinidad. You have affirmative action in the US. To a certain extent, these things are helpful. But I think the colonizers do have a duty to firstly acknowledge the wrongs that they've committed and to try to rectify and to repair those wrongs.
In this era of synodality then, how can the Catholic Church and the Catholic Church here in Trinidad contribute or further that argument?
I think our Catholic Church needs to, firstly, as we continue synodality, we have to look at the questions that we are asking. We're asking questions about how can we become a synodal church, and these questions are good, but how do we become a synodal people? How do we, as Trinidad and Tobago, understand unity? How do we see the worth and the value in each other? We now have a situation in our country where we have Arrival Day moving categorically to Indian Arrival Day and Emancipation Day to African Emancipation Day. And factually true, but there was a time when these things didn't need to be stated. There was a time when Archbishop Desmond Tutu of happy memory would have designated us as a rainbow nation. Yeah. And so I think if the church looks to that, and if the church looks to our focus on the integral human development of all people, which I can say we do, I think if that comes to the fore in our synodality and we work on developing all around and helping all of our people to experience the worth of who they are as human beings, Catholic anthropology comes in here, we are embodied souls, embodied spirits. And so we need to understand that within ourselves. We need to understand the role of our ancestors. We need to understand how our story impacts the stories of others. And that will bring synodality to what it's meant to be. Because if we remember the logo for synodality and what it actually means, it's journeying together. I think we've moved away from journeying together. We're journeying in groups and in cliques and in silos, and the church is, under the leadership of Pope Francis, is trying to lead us out of that. And hopefully in Trinidad, it takes on.
Father, this is a good place for us to end. We pray that the conversation on synodality will continue. But thanks very much for staying with us and being part of the show. And I'm sure we'll see you again some other time to discuss this at even greater length.
Thanks, Neil.
Yeah. Thanks, Father. Blessings. Thanks for staying with us. We'll be right back. Catholic News editor Raymond Sims gives us a preview of what's in store in this week's edition of the Catholic News.
In this week's Catholic News, Finbar Garcia advises on medical insurance, and we see the good work Simone de la Bastide and her team does, making a difference in the lives of the most vulnerable and challenged children in TNT with the Children's Ark. I am Raymond Sims, editor of the Catholic News.
And that brings us to the end of this week's episode of Altos. Remember, you can send your correspondence to us at altos@catholictt.org. We leave you with some scenes from African Emancipation Day celebrations recently. Do have a good week, everyone.
Altos is brought to you with the kind compliments of Rituals Coffee House.